Well, I'm really excited to dive more into this. And I actually really like that you are teaching in a Title I school because if you this can work, so to speak, in a Title I school, it can work anywhere in theory, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
So just so that we're all on the same page, can you define what you mean by critical thinking tasks so that we all are starting from the same place?
Yes. So, what I mean by critical thinking math task is I'm thinking about a warm up that's not the traditional do this problem from the lesson we learned yesterday or like spiral review. It's an intentional math adjacent activity, meaning that it still relies on math and like reasoning skills, but it's not grade level content. It's used to like prime students' minds at the beginning of class, like for creativity, and most importantly, giving them a boost of confidence in math because it's a quick win. And just a kid having like a positive experience at the beginning of a math class can really have great impacts the rest of class. So, with students, I generally call it a thinking task, not a warm up, but it's essentially the same thing because it gets their brains warmed up for the rest of the day.
I love that, especially because if you had a kid who like struggled with, say, yesterday's lesson, and now they're walking in into a warm up that is from yesterday's lesson, like it just piles on the crappiness, you know?
Exactly. And then
Yeah.
too, it I feel like warm-ups, like the traditional sense, they can take a really long time because of that. Whereas like these critical thinking tasks can take like 5 minutes or less. It's just like a small bite of something that students have fun with. It's math related and you get to move on afterwards. And if a kid doesn't get it, usually that quick review at the end of like, all right, someone tell us how you solved it. They get it and we get to move on and everyone feels good about it.
Before I ask you about, more specifically some of these critical thinking tasks, I'd love to know, how do we set this up so that we can incorporate more of these more often? Because I feel like I know for me, like I do a warm up and then I do direct instruction. And then sometimes we do stations. And so it's like my critical thinking tasks are kind of plugged in once a week on a Thursday here. And then maybe it might be a Monday here, or, like I'm definitely not, it's not fluid and I'm not, what am I trying to say? Like, it's not like a regular part of my class where it sounds like this is very regular for you. And so how do we make this more of a regular routine versus like this compartmentalized
Mm-hmm.
thing, if that makes
Yeah.
sense?
So I use them as warm-ups. So if you already do warm-ups in your classroom, this is a great way for you to like swap 1 or 2 days a week instead of doing like the traditional whatever warm-up you use. You're using one of these math adjacent thinking tasks. So I start off my class as soon as the bell rings. I go over the agenda for today. So like we're going to start off with our thinking task, then we're going to move into our direct instruction or we're going to go work at whiteboards and then we'll kind of do our notes at the end. So I'll give them the summary. And then after we do the summary, I do what's called a supply roundup. And this is where students have 1 minute to go grab all the materials they need for the next activity. And this piece I think is important because it makes sure that every kid is set up for success, but there's also a very specific time limit to it. And it was honestly inspired way back when I was in high school when I was babysitting, and this girl like hated picking up her stuff. But if you turn anything into a game for kids, they're more likely to do it than if you're just like, can you please go pick up your toys? It's like, you see how fast you can pick up your toys in like, or
30
whatever it
seconds.
is. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it having
Oh,
students
because
like,
they will dilly dally. They will take
oh
all
yeah,
period to get their stuff.
exactly, because it's like they have such a innate anxiety for math and they don't want to do it that they're going to take as long as they can to prolong the inevitable. So, the supply roundup, I usually do the warm-ups or the thinking tasks on mini whiteboards and I do one per team. And the reason I only do one per team is that way they have to collaborate together on the task itself. And sometimes a calculator too, if there's any computation involved. I don't want students to feel like they're left out because they can't do any computation. Then I'll put the slide up on the screen. I'll give a quick explanation, especially if it's a